Hello, welcome to the Pitch Book Podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Matt, and we also have your other host, Zach. Zach, how are you doing today?
Good, Matt. How are you?
Good. I am excellent. How was your week?
It's been a good week. Nothing too exciting or too crazy. But you're going to a Green Bay game this week, is that right?
Yeah, exactly. My wife is a Lions fan, and we looked at going to Detroit or maybe going to. I'm a Baltimore fan, but I've always wanted to go to Lambeau Field, and the Lions happen to be playing this week on Thursday, and there was a killer deal to fly to Milwaukee, so we're doing it. We're going to Green Bay. We fly out tomorrow. There's a Thursday night game, so look for us. My wife will be wearing the Lions gear, and I sprung for like 10th row in the end zone, so
wow,
should be pretty fun. We're excited.
So how are the Lions? How are things shaping up this year for the Lions?
They're decent. They're 2-1. They're pretty good.
Okay.
The Packers are also pretty good. They had a huge comeback on Sunday, so short week for both of them. It's going to be interesting. But yeah, I'm excited. We're going to go to there's a Green Bay Packer Hall of Fame that I'm excited to go to. It's just kind of the mecca of football, really. So yeah. Pretty excited. Small town. It's like having a stadium in your neighborhood. It's really weird. So I'm pretty excited. I'll tell you guys about it next time we do this. So
all right, that sounds good.
That's on the agenda. Okay, do you want to go first? You want me to go first? What are we doing this week?
Yeah, I'll go first.
Okay, go for it.
All right. Okay. So
I have no idea what book you're pitching today, so let's hear it. I'm excited.
I have a feeling. I don't know if you've read this book or not, but okay. I think this one's probably a little bit more well known than the previous books I've covered. So this one is it's called Atomic Habits.
Okay, yeah.
By James Clear.
Okay.
You've read it?
I have read it. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
So it's been a long time though. So, and I don't know if I retained or did anything from it, but yes, James Clear. I'm on his newsletter. Good guy. Basically just how to make your life better by small things, right? Like little things that's essentially the gist, right?
Yeah, that's it. That's it. That's right. So I've never really thought about habits, breaking it down into its nuclear components, figuring out what makes a habit. I know growing up, you would hear if you need to break a habit, it was always about bad habits, right? Never about good habits. But if you need to create a good habit or break a habit, it was like 21 days is how many times, how long you need to be doing that thing before it becomes a habit. And that's really as far as my knowledge set was before reading this book. And what I love about this book is he's the subject matter expert on habits. So I'll just recap the important parts of the book or what I got from the book. So the first part, first of all, atomic is taking something extremely small, and an atom can also be considered a source of immense energy. So that's where the atomic comes in. The habit is a routine performed regularly. And he starts the book out sharing this story, which I've heard this story before. The British cycling team, I believe it was 2009. Dave Brailsford was brought in as the coach. And up to this point, this is in England, up to this point, they had gone 110 years never winning the Tour de France. Their cycling team was so bad that the top bike manufacturers would not sell to them because they were worried about their brand being destroyed. They were so bad. So Dave comes in and he starts to apply this principle which he calls the aggregation of marginal gains. And it's searching for the tiny margins of improvement. But 1% improvement every day over time compounds to some serious changes. He said the whole principle came from the idea that if you broke down everything you could think of that goes into riding a bike and then improve it by 1%, you will get a significant increase when you put them all together. So he was doing things like changing out the mattresses that the cyclists were sleeping on at night to make sure they were comfortable, that they were resting well. Little things that you don't think about: their food, their diet, of course, the seats on their bike, the fabric, the material. Did it make them sore after riding, or was it more comfortable? So those little tiny marginal details he was putting in, and they went on, I believe they went on to win the Tour de France after a while. Anyways, great starting story. James talks about habits being broken down into 4 components. The cue. So there's the problem phase. When you have a habit, there's usually a cue, something that you see or hear or smell, and that leads to a craving. Okay. That's the problem phase. So you're cued with something, then you crave it, and then it's followed by the solution phase, the response and the reward. So what do you do with the craving? What's the action? And then what's the reward you get after taking that action? And all habits, both good and bad, can be tied back to this loop. So if you get a text on your phone, you immediately want to see what the text says, who it's from. You're curious, so you grab your phone, you read and then you read the text, and the reward is maybe there's some kind of dopamine release in your brain that's like satisfied because you've read the text. So he breaks these 4 laws into the cue, craving, response, reward. Those are the 4 key elements. And he calls them the 4 laws of either creating a good habit or breaking a bad habit. Like the inverse of everything I'm going to say is how you break a bad habit, but I'm going to focus on building the good habits. And then I'll share with you
So
oh, go ahead. Yeah.
Just curious, what so I can think of a cue, like, oh, I smell something delicious and I want to go eat a donut or whatever. What's a cue for a good habit though? Does that make sense? Like that's my first thought.
Yeah, he does. So I'll break that down. So the first law for the cue is making something obvious. So make it very visible, whatever that good habit is. Like if you want to learn to play guitar, you should probably have your guitar out and in the open somewhere where you traffic frequently, or maybe a place that you sit. Your guitar's right next to you. So it's very obvious. The second law is the craving, making it attractive, something that you want to do. The third law is the response. He said making it easy, not hard. When you're first starting the habit, don't overcomplicate it or make it a difficult habit. Start with just something very basic, like if you're wanting to run a marathon, but you can't even run a mile. Maybe you start just by walking around the block, something that everybody can do.
Okay.
And then the fourth law is to make it satisfying. So having that reward when you're done. And then the inverse of that, the 4 laws of breaking a bad habit, are making the bad habit invisible. So if you're trying to stop smoking, maybe you don't drive by the gas station where you always stop to buy cigarettes. You take a different path, so you just don't see it and have that automatic cue in your head. Gotcha. Make it unattractive, make it difficult, and make it unsatisfying. So the opposite is how you go about breaking a habit.
Does he talk about, I know a lot of people talk about replacing a bad habit with a good habit, right? Like, so instead of smoking, I'm going to go jogging or something. Does he talk about that at all? Or does he say if you just use these 4 cues or four things that you can just break the bad habit?
Exactly. Yeah. Just focus on
you don't have to replace it necessarily.
Not necessarily. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. Yeah, focus, break down, think about what the habit is, and then think through those 4 phases, through the cue, the craving, the response, and the reward. So he goes, so let's go back to your question on the cue. He said our brains are prediction machines. We're being cued by our environment, often subconsciously. And he shares a story about he shares this story. A French philosopher, Denis Diderot, lived nearly his entire life in poverty, but all that changed one day in 1765. Diderot's daughter was about to be married, and he could not afford to pay for the wedding. Despite his lack of wealth, Diderot was well known for his role as the co-founder and writer of the Encyclopedia, one of the most comprehensive encyclopedias of the time. When Catherine the Great, the Empress of Russia, heard that Diderot's financial troubles, her heart went out to him. She was a book lover and greatly enjoyed his encyclopedia. She offered to buy Diderot's personal library for £1,000, more than $150,000 today. Suddenly, Diderot had money to spare. With his new wealth, he not only paid for the wedding, but also acquired a scarlet robe for himself. Diderot's scarlet robe was beautiful, so beautiful, in fact, that he immediately noticed how out of place it seemed, surrounded by his more common possessions. He wrote that there was no more ordination, no more unity, no more beauty between his elegant robe and the rest of his stuff. Diderot soon felt the urge to upgrade his possessions. He replaced his rug with one from Damascus. He decorated his home with expensive sculptures. He bought a mirror to place above the mantel and better kitchen table. He tossed aside his old straw chair for a leather one. Like falling dominoes, one purchased led to the next. Diderot's behavior is not uncommon. In fact, the tendency for one purchase to lead to another one has a name, the Diderot effect. The Diderot effect states that obtaining a new possession often creates a spiral of consumption that leads to additional purchases. So he talks about, Diderot wakes up in the morning. He's like, my scarlet, you know, robe doesn't match everything else in my house, and he just kind of starts compounding this bad habit. So when you're making a good habit, you want to think about making it obvious, having your choice architecture. There was a lady, Anne Thorndike, who was in the Massachusetts General Hospital in Boston. She wanted people to eat healthier in the cafeteria. So they went about rearranging the entire cafeteria. So as people were checking out, instead of having sodas right there by the checkout, they added more water stations. And by the little food baskets, they added more water. And over time, they noticed that soda purchases fell by 11.4%, and water sales went up by 25%, just by redesigning the environment. So if you are trying to get into a good habit, maybe it's working out, maybe consider having the dumbbells right by your bed, or like I said, having that guitar
or or make sure that the pie is put in the fridge and not sitting out for you to chomp on, right?
That's right.
Put it away, make it a little harder to get to, or not, at least not noticeable.
That's exactly right. Yeah, kind of putting it out of place, or not right there. I've noticed that if I have a plate of cookies out on the counter, it's too hard for me to walk by and not take one. So I've got to do exactly that. I've got to put them away either in the closet or in the fridge. Great point.
Cool.
All right. So second law is the craving, making it attractive. Dopamine creates desire. Sometimes the anticipation is better than the thing itself, which I thought was kind of interesting. If you think about going on vacation, like you're getting ready to go on this trip to watch Green Bay, or to watch the Lions play Green Bay.
Exactly.
And every day you're waking up and you're thinking about it. What shoes am I going to wear on Wednesday? What should I wear on the plane? Where are we going to stay? Oh, I wonder if that hotel's nice. Your brain is constantly getting a dopamine hit in anticipation of the event itself. And sometimes the anticipation's better than the event itself. You might go there, somebody throws beer on you, and you have a terrible experience at the game. I don't know. For you, you might think that's fun, but he shared a story about a guy named Roland Byrne, who was an engineer. He wanted to get better at biking, so he connected his TV to his bike, and it would stop. He would turn on Netflix, but it would only work if he got up to a certain miles per hour on his bike. So his craving while he was biking was watching Netflix. And if he started to slow down below his preferred miles per hour, it would just turn off. So, he'd have to kind of start pedaling again. So that was kind of an interesting connection, the craving to biking. So he's thinking, every time I get on my bike, I get to watch Netflix. I can binge as much as I want.
Right. As long as I'm on the bike.
That's right. Yep. So having that dopamine hit, watching Netflix. I've been doing a little bit of a different workout system lately, where I work out pretty hard for 30 minutes circuit training. But the one thing that I've connected to it is I cannot start listening to a book or a podcast or any news until I start my workout every morning. And that's how I've been managing my day. So I look forward to it in the morning. I'm like, okay, I'm going to get my day going. But before I turn on a podcast, I've got to start lifting and start the watch.
That doesn't apply for our podcast. You guys can listen anytime you want. Okay,
Yeah,
guys?
whenever.
You don't have to. Just put it on, tell a friend, no worries.
Exactly. So it is kind of interesting. He talks about being in groups of people that are wanting to do the same things that you're doing. So if you're wanting to ride your bike more, maybe joining a club or a group where their culture is part of the culture that you want to participate in, and in doing that, you kind of rise together. It becomes more culturally acceptable to ride your bike to work, to ride your bike to the store. That's what those groups do. And I'm just using that as an example. But think about participating more in cultures that are aligned with your habit. So that's the second law. The third law is to make it easy, which reading the book, this stuck out to me the most, because we often, when we are setting out to do something, January 1st, I want to lose 20 pounds. That's the goal. Instead of setting the goal or thinking, how long do I have to do this thing to lose the 20 pounds? Instead, think about how many repetitions. So he talks about the repetitions being even more important maybe than the form. Am I doing it good? Is this a quality repetition? It's like, don't worry about that. That will come over time. You'll gradually iterate and get better, but focus on the quantity of the reps. One quote that he shares earlier in the book is he says, if you want to master a habit, start with repetition, not perfection. Don't map out every feature of a new habit. You just need to practice it. So that's the third law, getting your reps in. Earlier in the book, he focuses on your identity really being the most important thing to controlling your outcomes. So we often set a goal and we say, okay, this is the outcome I want to have. And we think, if I achieve that outcome, that will change me. When the opposite is true. If I focus on me, what my identity is, the outcome will come naturally. Right. And an example that he gave was, if somebody, and I'm coming back to smoking because that's one that we always pick on as a bad habit. But if somebody was trying to quit smoking and they're offered a smoke, there's two responses. He lays out one that says, I'm trying to quit smoking, like as a response, which in your identity, you still believe that you're a smoker when you respond that way. The second response to somebody that offers you a cigarette would be, I'm not a smoker.
I don't smoke. Yeah.
Right. And so the more that you get your repetitions in, the more you're voting for that identity. And even if you make a mistake, even if you fall short, you know that the next decision that you can make, that next little repetition that you're going to get in, is a vote for the new identity. So it's like a weighing machine. And over time, the more votes that you cast for that new identity, the more you're likely to become that person that you're striving to be. And the follow-on effect of that is you get all the results, the outcome, achieving the goals, whatever, you're aligned to becoming that person. So the third law is just making it easy, focus on your repetitions, and then over time it can become more difficult. And then lastly, the fourth law is making it satisfying. The costs of good habits are in the present. The costs of bad habits are in the future. I love that thought, that there are costs to our good habits. We bear those costs today. We don't get the benefit today. We get those later on. But for the bad habits, those costs, you're going to feel those in the future, like saving for retirement is a good example.
Right.
They found that people that delay gratification, they generally have higher SATs. They generally have lower substance abuse, better responses to stress, and superior social skills.
Did he talk about the marshmallow test?
No.
Have you heard about that? The marshmallow test for the kids?
Yeah. Was that a Stanford study?
I think it was a Stanford. I think so. And it was what I'm remembering is little kids, they give a marshmallow and say, hey, I gotta leave the room for a minute or whatever it is. Don't eat the marshmallow. If you don't eat the marshmallow, I'll bring you another one, right? And then they just shows them like squirming and freaking out, and they found, like, I think it was after 30 years or something, and I could be wrong about all this, but essentially the people that were able to keep from the delay the gratification of the marshmallow had better, like, just much more success in life than the people that were immediately grabbing the marshmallow. So interesting.
Yeah, it's totally true. So get good at delaying your gratification. But he did give a couple examples to reward yourself when you do the habit. Some people, instead of like, I don't know if it's a bad habit or a good habit, but I love to buy books. I love doing it. And if you view that as a bad habit, maybe one thing I should do is take that money and save for something else, for a trip or something, and reward myself. But you can reward yourself financially every time you don't do that thing. You can take the cost associated with that and put it towards something that will be a good reward for you. So excellent book, highly recommend it. Again, he breaks down just the ways to think about habits, and I think they're good, positive, fundamental steps forward for individuals that are wanting to improve, either wanting to create a better habit or break a bad habit. Highly recommend reading it. And when we close out today, I've got a quote from James Clear. So
perfect. Let me ask you this.
That's my book. Yeah.
The batting practice, right? Like, what do we take home from this? What's the one thing that either you have applied or want to apply from that book? Probably a lot that you can. So what's kind of one that you're like very focused on?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of application. One of the things that I'm applying, I mentioned this workout regime that I've just started. I've just wanted to become a bit more tone. And so to do that, you have to be more consistent, doing more reps. And so I am applying. I took the principles from the book and I'm starting to apply those,
cool.
as I mentioned, to
we'll hold you accountable on the podcast. So that's good.
Yeah. I mean, I hate doing sit-ups. I absolutely hate it. But I'm doing them. I'm getting my reps in, and they're not beautiful, but they're getting done. So,
well, I'll just tell you this. You mentioned, I think it was a community or a group or something that shares your values, right? Is that what you call that, community? Something like that.
Yeah.
So I have a really good friend, shout out to Tyler, who we joined like a boxing gym, and he basically would almost make me go every day. And it was awesome. I loved it. It was actually kind of a far drive. Problem is he moved out of Utah, and now I'm like, can't be bothered to do that anymore now that Tyler's gone. So it's kind of funny when you have somebody that kind of forces you socially to go do something like that. It's funny because you can almost trick yourself into doing some good for yourself by joining, like, CrossFit, or become somebody who lifts weights with a partner or something like that. So
yeah,
interesting.
That's a good example. I mean, boxing is a really good habit. And as you think through that, what was it that the habit kind of ended?
You don't want to let it. Well, you don't want to let him down, right? And part of it was it is far away from me. Once he moved, I had a couple injuries, and so I was I actually had a little break in them charging me money, and it was to the point where, like, I was going to pay for a full new year, and he moved right at the time. Now, if I had paid for it, I might be more inclined to go for it. But because I had this pause and he moved, so they weren't charging me for it. So I'm like, it's kind of hard for me to justify driving all the way out there every day with no friend, because it was fun to go with him, right? It was a lot more fun. It was a nightmare as far as the cardio and stuff, but it was fun to go sparring with him afterwards. And anyway, the point is, it's like him being gone, I'm not financially tied to it, right? That's one of the reasons why, they say place a bet on losing weight, or place a bet on working out, so that you have a little skin in the game. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
When I didn't have any skin in the game or a friend there, it was real easy not to go, right? So,
well, and you know what? It's not like it's the end. You get to vote every day. We all get to vote on.
Well, now I just go to the normal gym, and they do have a heavy bag there, and I go punch it there occasionally, but it's not nearly as fun, and not nearly as hard of a workout, right? The kind of that area, that that particular gym kind of forces you to work, push yourself.
Yeah.
Instead of you just sitting there kind of deciding if you're tired or not.
Were you sparring or mostly just
No, I
working
mean,
with bags?
mostly working with bags, but once we were done with the bags, we would spar and mess around a little bit. We kind
Okay.
of weren't supposed to, but we did anyway.
I
And
don't think I'd want a Matt Liggett 100% on me. I think that would be pretty
it would
painful.
be I have long arms, so I can keep you at bay.
Yeah.
And yeah, I'm not a small guy, so only the heavyweights fight me. But yeah, it was fun. It's a lot of fun. It was funny. We were like I said, sparring one time. Just a quick story. And a couple people from the gym were watching us, and he's a little bit shorter than me, so I have really long arms. So he's always at a distance and kind of always running, and I'm the big guy kind of chasing him down like a big oaf. And he finally one time he actually got a nice jab at me, and it kind of popped my head back. And we were wearing headgear, but it just popped my head back, and everyone's like freaking out, like they're like, Tyler, don't do that. What are you doing? And I'm like, guys, it didn't hurt at all. It's just like it just popped my head back. It's no big deal. But the whole gym is like, well, the whole gym. There's 3 or 4 people. They're like freaking out, and I'm like, guys, I'm fine. It's no big deal. Like it's not like I got knocked out or anything. My head got popped back. It was a good jab by him.
Just a little hit to the ego.
Well, yeah, which is fine. It's actually kind of fun because you're like, I don't even know what it feels like. Like I said, I've never been in a fight, but it's fun to just kind of, and especially when you're wearing, protective gear and you got big gloves on that aren't, you're not trying to kill each other. You're just kind of friends and kind of going light on each other. So it's fun.
Well, I think, boxing is good. I think everyone should get punched in the face at least once in their life, just really hard, so you know what it feels like.
Exactly.
You're less likely to punch somebody really hard and to avoid ever getting punched again. I mean,
exactly.
it would end a lot of conflict in the world if we all just
we all knew what that was like. Oh, that's a good philosophy. All right, you ready for my book?
Yeah, let's have it. What do you have? And I don't know what you're pitching this week.
So this, let me just tell you a story before I tell you even what the book is. There's a place near the airport that has like, I can't remember what it's called, but it's this little almost like junky warehouse that has stuff that has fallen off a truck. I don't know what it is. Just all this random stuff. You can get anything from like artwork to clothes to bug spray, just anything. It's kind of in the shipping area near Salt Lake. And I used to just go there if I was in the area or maybe gonna go pick somebody up from the airport and just happen to have extra time. Anyway, so I was walking around there many moons ago and just saw like a pile of books, and I found this book there, and the title intrigued me, and it was probably like $2, and so I'm like, so I picked it up, and here's what it is. Oh, can you see it?
Yeah. Never
Rebels with a Pig by Mark McCormack. So this used to be called, something different. Well, they didn't teach you in Harvard, or anyway, it was kind of not as cool of a name, not as catchy. But anyway, so I bought it because I like business books and whatever. And it says, and 99 other ideas to help to build your business and career, right? And it's kind of a cool book in that you can just pick it up and turn to a random chapter and get some cool advice. Mark McCormack owns a marketing agency for sports, like sports marketing agency, basically. But it's kind of old. This is a pretty old book. It's kind of funny. He talks about like, this newfangled email thing. And, it's kind of funny because he talks about faxes and stuff, stuff that's a little bit archaic, but what he talks about it makes a lot of sense. And what's kind of cool for me liking sports is that he talks about different people that maybe are a little bit older, like Pete Sampras in tennis or Michael Jordan or whatever. He'll talk about some of those people and relate stories around them that relate to business, right? So for example, you talk about Atomic Habits. It's good that you brought that up. One of the things he talks about is Michael Jordan breaking down a goal into small parts. He talks about somebody asking him, how do you score 32 points a game? And he says, well, it's easy. I got 4 quarters. That's 8 points a quarter. He's like, I can score 8 points a quarter. That's no big deal. And then Mark, actually the author says, I wonder how many other players in the NBA with much less talent just thought to themselves, well, if I can score 3 points a game, that's 12, if I can score, 5 points a game, I'm scoring 20 points a game. So he just just stuff like that, right? That kind of relates to sports, but also to business. And it's not all about that, right? Sometimes he's just giving you good advice that, it doesn't necessarily have anything to do with a particular sports person. But I'm just so you can see kind of here, like I've just got like little things here. And the reason I have these here is this is a book with my team. I used to manage a fairly large team. I would actually make them read this as a book club, and we would read the book, and then we would talk about it. Like we would do one chapter, or whatever, a week. We'd get lunch, and then just kind of talk about what we all learned in the chapter. And over time, I just kind of like made notes and said, "Here's what I want to talk about." I've highlighted things in it, and then anyway, I would actually like say, "Hey, if you want, want some good advice here, just look at this. Look what I've underlined, whatever." So I'm just gonna grab a couple of these randomly and just read you a couple things that might be cool, right? Go ahead.
Is this like a collection of essays from the author, or he's just telling stories?
It's kind of like there's not it's not like here's a foundational thing and then here's the next step. Here's the next step to your career. It's more just little things. He does break it down into like he talks about giving yourself a reality check. Like, what do you do in business? Like, are you judging yourself how you should as far as what you do? Are you doing as good as much as you think, right? Are you doing as much as you think, or like what does your manager think, right, that you do? Then he talks about giving the workplace a reality check. So like, is your workplace and the culture there congruent with what you want to be, or be aware of these types of issues that might come up? And then he talks about acquiring a power base. So like how to build yourself up in your career. So kind of like the first part's kind of early, like gut check, reality check for yourself. The next part is more about the company and kind of more, maybe more what a manager might want to read and say, these are some things I see in my own company or whatever. And then the last one's kind of like, how do you get better at what you're doing? And then towards the end is like promotions, demotions, and other career hiccups that he talks about. So he talks, there's just a lot of really good practical information in here. One of the things that was kind of cool is, and I think that people that have been, so I think it's a really good people for who to start, a really good book for people who are just starting a career, like a true career for young people. But it clearly, if you're humble enough, you can read this as somebody who's been, you've been at your career and I have for a while. There's things that we can catch or we can read, right, and apply to ourselves. So one thing that's interesting, the very first thing he talks about is the person who will change your life is not in it now. So you never know who you're going to meet, who you should network with that might make a huge difference in your life in 5 years or whatever. He talks about, it's kind of cool. He talks about beware the small defining moments. He talks a lot about loyalty in this book. And he says that most people think like, oh, Zac, he's my best friend because he was there when my car was totaled and he pulled me out of a burning car, something like that. Yeah. When really it's more the small moments like, oh, somebody was talking trash about Matt and I kind of backed them up. I said, hey, Matt's a good guy or whatever. Or, when you're considerate to somebody, people think, in other words, there are small things that you do every day that people judge fair or not, harsh, fair, they judge it pretty harshly. And a lot of times they're small, like he says, when you're considerate, I won't read these in detail, just these are just the subheadings. When you show backbone, when you keep a confidence, in other words, when you're not gossiping, when you anticipate the other side's point of view, when you see an accident waiting to happen. This is actually worth reading. He says, the next time you waver between speaking up or shutting up about an accident waiting to happen, don't think of it as a choice between being a team player. What's at stake is really your reputation as a thinker and advisor. There are moments when your reputation for intelligence and wisdom, these are moments, for your reputation of intelligence and wisdom, which where an even rarer quality is formed. And then the last one is when you remain loyal. He says, in my mind, loyalty is the greatest virtue. Loyalty isn't extracted by huge public displays. This is kind of what I was talking about. More often than not, it shows up in small private moments. For example, when someone attacks your boss and you defend him or her, your character and reputation are shaped by such small tests. If nothing else, I guarantee that the person who is attacking your boss will be impressed by your defense. I know I would be. He talks about, I just talked about the managing goals in small parts. He talks about don't lower the bar for yourself. That's what I was talking about, how he says, give yourself a reality check. He says people tend to, he says as a manager, he's looked at, thousands of performance reviews, and people tend to overestimate their contribution to a project. They take credit for successes that maybe should be somebody else's. They have an elevated opinion of their professional skills. They conveniently ignore their costly failures or time-consuming dead ends. exaggerate the person's impact on the company profits because they don't appreciate the very hidden and real costs of operating a business. He says, in short, people are too easy on themselves. They lower the bar. So he says, don't lower the bar for yourself, right? There's a difference between what you do and what you can do. You have to stay focused on the former before you can even think about the latter. The other thing I think, and this is probably, you're going to ask me what I've applied in my life. Let me just tell you this, and this is probably the one thing that if I had one takeaway, which is kind of weird, because anyway, he talks about, he says it's better to be a racehorse than a plow horse, and he compares the two things, right? There's a racehorse who's built for speed, and then a plow horse who's built to just trudge and work the ground. And he says that some people think that the plow horse is like what you should be looking for in business, and really it's the racehorse. He talks about basically don't waste time on things that don't need time to be wasted on them, right? And one of the biggest things that I've applied and I think is a really helped my career is being quick at responding. He talks about like getting back to people quickly.
Yes.
Don't double check what doesn't need to be double checked. Sometimes 90% of a project that's done quickly is better than 100% if it takes too much time. He talks about putting Parkinson's law in reverse. I don't know if you heard of Parkinson's law, where the work will expand to reach the allotted time. So if you delegate something, so you got a week to get this done, well, it's going to take a week. If you tell them you got 2 days to get this done, well, suddenly it'll get done in 2 days. And he says, put that in reverse for yourself. So if you need to get something done, if you make it a shorter time frame, obviously be realistic about it, but you're not going to procrastinate. You're just going to get it done. So things like that, that's one of the things that's been impressive. And just kind of doing some consulting, seeing the people that respond quickly is really impressive, right? From my point of view. And it's not just responding quickly, it's just being on the ball, doing what you say you're going to do. Let's see. Probably worth reading the main thing he talks about as far as never wrestle with a pig, right? He's talking about time management. He says, note when people call you. He says basically we all know the basics, right? Like block time, plan ahead, be on time, maintain a to-do list. But he says there's other things that are more important. This guy showed you how old it is. He says always carry a pen, right? Which now you have your phone. He says note when people call you, right? So if you got a guy who calls you at 8 in the, well, that's the best time to get a hold of him or her, right? Says don't double check what doesn't need double checking. Be a day ahead of the curve. So plan your day tonight. Plan your day for tomorrow. Plan what you're going to do. Don't do it when you wake up in the morning. He says tackle your tasks in order of, and again, this is not super revealing. Tackle your tasks in order of descending importance. Never pick up someone else's. This is a good one. Never pick up someone else's ringing phone unless you're prepared to pick up someone else's headache, right? He says this is actually one of the things I did and being in sales is really critical, and I've seen it multiple times. He says, I've seen how effective it is. When the day is done, make one more call. And there were many times where it's like, okay, I'm done. It's time to, 6 o'clock. I'm done. I'm going to make one more call. That one last call led to an awesome sale or whatever, many times in my career. And, that's something you don't have to be literal about. You could just do it as far as tasks go, right? And maybe it's not a call. Maybe it's just one extra thing that you do. Then he says, I'll read the never wrestle with a pig, and then we can be done with this. But he says, never wrestle with a pig. You'll get dirty, and only the pig enjoys it. In other words, don't waste time arguing with other people who love to argue for the sake of argument. I wonder how many man hours are lost in every organization because people get innocently lured into discussions with colleagues who love to debate the undebatable and argue the inarguable. We all know such people exist. They're adversarial, confrontational, and incredibly talkative. They have an insatiable desire to be right all the time and are incapable of admitting that they're wrong. You can't win a wrestling match with these people. You can only lose time. My advice, avoid them like the plague. So that's where the title comes from. And the last thing he says in this little chapter says, write at least 5 fan letters a day. So he writes 5 letters to like broadcasters or people that he admires or whatever.
Really?
He says 5. Oh, you want me to read it? You sound interested in this. Let me read it to you. He says, a few years ago, I wrote a letter to a broadcaster. He wasn't a client, nor what I would call a close friend, simply to tell him how much I enjoyed his broadcast and how much I admired his career. Not long thereafter, the man called me to say that my fan letter had made his year. Since then, I made a point of writing at least 5 fan letters a year. There's no business reward for doing so. I could probably spend that time more profitably working for a company, but the psychic rewards are considerable. I'm not sure what this has to do with effective time management, but I do know that it's nice to occasionally take a breather from being hyper efficient and just do something that makes you or someone else feel good. So
think about if you did that every day, like you take that principle of, I'm going to text 5 people today,
right.
something just very
or
simple.
or even one, right? Like I would feel like the volume of 5 people every day. But like we were talking about earlier, right? Like how do you, if you just reach out to one person who might be, you don't know if they're struggling, but
Yeah.
like, hey man, just want to know what I appreciate our friendship and whatever it is. But
I think if you did one a day, it'd be too easy to skip. But
mm,
if you did 5, you're thinking, okay, I've got to think of 5 people today, or 4, or whatever it is, and you're just ticking those off in the morning.
yeah,
You would have some pretty positive compounding effects.
I will say this, Zach, and you know this because we've been friends for a long time. It's one of those things where you and I might not see each other for a year, right? And then, but it doesn't matter. We just pick up right where we left off.
Yeah, yeah.
But imagine if like you or I or whatever had been a little bit more like proactive in reaching out, saying, hey, we really should go to dinner. We really should do something. We should, or hey, or even at least, hey, how are you doing, man? How's your wife? Uh, those kind of moments just could bring you closer together to people, right? And again, make them feel good, make you feel good, and you never know, like you might find that there's somebody who really needs your help, right? So
Yeah, that's true.
Anyway,
it reminds me, this book, I'm really interested. It sounds like, don't take shortcuts, do the right thing, don't worry about the outcomes too much, just be the good person. But it reminds me of a book I read years ago where the author talks about a fictitious bank. He called it the cosmic bank, that you're constantly making deposits to.
yeah,
And sometimes you might think, man, if I stop and help that person, it's going to slow down my day, I'm going to lose momentum. Just stop and help them. You like,
right,
there's constant interruptions. But if you're helping people and you're doing the right thing constantly, you get these massive amounts of deposits over time into this fictitious bank. And every once in a while, you get a huge withdrawal out of nowhere, like somebody helps you out, or you get a bonus that you weren't expecting, or
exactly.
just something really positive happens in your life. So I like, as you were reading that, I was thinking, just all those little deposits that we
Yeah,
make. Yeah, those little, or even applying it to atomic habits, these little uh, things that we can do to improve ourselves. That's awesome.
yeah. It's funny because I joked about when I was, my very first car was a little Chevy S10 and a little truck. And it was funny because at that time, right out of graduating high school and everything, everybody's moving from different apartments, and my truck's the perfect size to move one guy out of an apartment into a new apartment. So I was constantly like, Matt, can I borrow your truck? Can you help me move or whatever? So I was always like, kind of begrudgingly like helping people move. And John would always joke around like, okay, this is like moving karma, so that when it comes time for me to move, everybody's going to come back and help me move because I've helped so many people move.
Yeah,
So let
yeah.
me just read you this one last thing because it talks
Okay,
about habits.
okay.
You might find this very interesting. He says bad habits drive out good habits. He says this is a variation on Gresham's law. Bad money drives out good money. I saved it for last to make the point that time management is a skill. You don't need any natural talent to be well organized. Anyone can learn it by acquiring good habits and shedding bad habits. But it's a skill that requires constant practice, and you have to practice perfectly. You can't be punctual some of the time. You have to be punctual all the time. It's a habit, and a good one. If you break the habit with occasional tardiness, it won't be long before tardiness becomes habitual. Likewise, you can't organize your life by carefully planning some days and winging it on others. You have to work hard on planning every day. The good news is that hard work pays off. After a while, being organized becomes habitual. So anyway, that's literally not even half. I just glanced through half the book of my little bookmarks,
Yeah.
and it's just again, some people might think like, oh, this is for people that are just graduating college or whatever. But I really think that there's a lot of little gems in there that you could just totally apply to your work life or personal life, and get better. So again, just as far as applying batting practice stuff, I have been try to be very good about responding quickly, doing things quickly. As I've done a little bit of consulting recently, there'll be like an invite that comes in my mind, comes to my inbox, and I'll need to forward it to somebody, and I'll think, I'm just sitting here on the couch watching some football. I'll just do that tomorrow. And I'm like, you know what? Because I don't trust forwarding it from my phone. So I'm like, you know what? I'm just gonna get up and hurry and forward it and get it done, and it's done. You know, I mean, that way I don't have to worry about it. It's done, and I look good because I did it quickly. So anyway, that's my 2 cents on never wrestle with a pig.
I love
Cool.
it. That's cool. All right.
All right.
So
You gotta. I should say I have I'm gonna save it. I think there's a band I've been listening to, but I kind of want to wait for the vinyl actually to show up so I can share it with you guys. So we'll wait on that one.
okay.
But you want to give us our quote and we can be done?
Yeah. So two quotes. These are both actually from James Clear.
Okay.
One is from
one's from the book and one's not.
One's from the book and one's from, I follow him on LinkedIn. Just good quality stuff. He's a very clear thinker, no pun intended, if that's his real name. But you can go to jamesclear.com, find all of his writings there. I think he has a ton of blog posts, but the book is definitely worth the read. So in the book, this is page 27, he says, "You do not rise to the level of your goals, you fall to the level of your systems." So he's very much clear-headed about developing good systems. To create good habits, you need a system, not a goal. The goal is just not something that's going to help you attain anything. And then ironically, today he posted, "Goals are for people who care about winning once. Systems are for people who care about winning repeatedly." So if you think about any basketball team, football team that has repeatedly won any kind of championship, usually there's some kind of system in place that the coach has deployed that has allowed them to have repeat victories, versus our goal is to get it to the World Series, right? And maybe you get there that year, but you're not going to be seen for the next 30 years. So think about systems rather than goals. That's the two quotes from James Clear.
Cool. Okay. All right. Hey, everybody. Thanks for being part of the Pitchbook podcast. Tell your friends and like and subscribe, all that stuff. And we'll catch you on the next one.
All right. Thanks, Matt.
Yep.
See ya.